really are a ton of platforms to stream your music online these days. And I think knowing the different audiences they serve and their own strengths and weaknesses is really crucial to being able to get the most out of streaming your music online. Of course, we got to start with the big one, which has sort of increasingly stood out from its competitors, which is Spotify. Spotify has a huge listener base. It's increasingly the way a lot of people, just listen to music on a day-to-day basis and also discover new music. In that respect, Spotify's Discover playlists have now, gained the ability to, I think, break artists in the way that a good review could in the past in a blog or in a music paper. So Spotify is definitely a significant streaming platform right now. The downside of Spotify is that, as many know, the revenues that you get per play are not terribly high. So I think for a lot of artists, Spotify ends up being a tool for exposure and discoverability. But as always, it's challenging to turn potential listeners into actual ones. There are plenty of other streaming platforms as well. In fact, all of the big tech companies sort of have their own service. Apple Music, Amazon, Google. There's of course also Tidal and Deezer are two other examples. And all of these platforms have sort of different payment models, different revenue models for artists. For example, Tidal boasts of being better than Spotify. That was actually some of their big sort of marketing pitch when they first launched the platform. But overall, revenues through streaming tend to be quite low. So for it to really be, I think, worthwhile, it has to be for artists who have a fairly significant listener base already. There are also, of course, platforms that are geared towards specific styles of music. I'm thinking of Idagio and Primephonic for classical music. There is, of course, Jazzed for, unsurprisingly, jazz music fans. And I think the main appeal of these sorts of platforms is not more content, but less content. There's less content that listeners who wouldn't be interested in it just don't have to sit through, and then there is also, sort of exclusive content. But on the other hand, all of the big platforms like Spotify have really deep catalogs of music across all genres, so you don't necessarily need to go to a specialist platform if you're not so inclined. Many of these platforms have listener bases that overlap between them, but I think most people sort of choose one or two based on a variety of factors. The price, of course, the audio quality is another one, the variety of music available, the availability of certain exclusive music, and of course technological factors like compatibility or integration with a smartphone, a tablet, what have you. As an artist, you may decide you want to focus mainly on just one or two of these platforms, or you may decide that you want to be on all of them. Of course, you have a chance of reaching a greater audience that way, but it does require more work in actually submitting your music to all of those different platforms. There are services that can do it on your behalf, but of course, those services aren't free. They charge money for that, and that takes away from the revenues that you're getting for streaming, so you would have to hope that your streaming revenues would be significant enough for it to be worthwhile. There are also platforms that offer a hybrid take on streaming. I'm thinking of Bandcamp, for example, where you can stream songs and albums, but you can also have paid downloads. You can sell physical copies of your music. You can even sell merch like t-shirts or tote bags or what have you. Of course, this is only touching on audio. Streaming video is increasingly important as well. And there's a number of big platforms that we should look at in that respect. The biggest is probably YouTube, which I think most people know as a sort of just general video site. YouTube is big for music, though. I think after Spotify, it's one of the ways that a lot of people engage with new music and discover new artists. And sort of in a similar sense, TikTok, which is maybe more of a social media network, also I think is increasingly one of the most important ways of connecting with young listeners while sharing video content, and is definitely not something that should be overlooked. The major platforms tend to be sort of oriented towards a more general audience, but there are some music-specific platforms available as well. For example, there is Medici.tv, which does recordings of classical music performances, also does live streaming of some classical music performances, and also a newer option just within the last few months is earlymusic.tv as well. So a smaller music-focused platform might not have the same audience as a YouTube, for example. It might not have the same brand recognition, but it can make it easier for listeners to find your music when they're sort of just browsing other content on the website. There are also platforms that are geared more towards live music performances. Again, there's sort of more general ones like Twitch, YouTube again. Of course, all of the main social media networks like Facebook and Instagram offer live video streaming as well. You can even do it via Zoom. But there are also sort of music-specific ones that are worth looking into. And two that come to mind are Stageit and Street Jelly, which are definitely worth checking out. So whatever approach you decide to take with streaming, I think the one thing we can't deny is that streaming is here to stay. And I think that it would be wise for artists to sort of find a way that works for them to engage with at least a couple of these platforms, to get their music out there, to find an audience and to generate a bit of revenue.